When I first joined the U.S. Forest Service, I thought I knew what I was getting into. I imagined hiking through forests, maintaining trails, and maybe occasionally coming across a bear or a wolf. Nothing too dangerous, nothing out of the ordinary. I had no idea what I was truly signing up for. It all started during my final year of college when I saw an opening for a summer position in the Forest Service. It was a practical choice for me. Something outdoors, something that would get me out of the classroom and into nature. Plus, the pay wasn't bad, and it would give me some experience for my eventual career in environmental science. I applied without thinking much about it, and a few weeks later, I was packing my bags and heading for the dense forests of the Pacific Northwest. The moment I arrived at the ranger station, I was hit with an overwhelming sense of calm. The towering pines, the crisp air, and the quiet beauty of the place felt like something out of a dream. My new colleagues welcomed me with enthusiasm, telling me I was joining a legacy of forest rangers who had worked in these lands for decades. The first thing they told me was that my training would be short but intensive, a crash course to prepare me for the dangers of the job. At first, I thought this was just standard procedure, nothing unusual, but as they walked me through the basics, how to maintain a safe trail, how to deal with injured animals, how to navigate the forest, there was one thing they kept stressing: the rules. 6 simple rules. 6 rules that had been passed down from ranger to ranger, year after year. The kind of rules that, if ignored, could cost you your life in these vast, untamed wilds. As I listened, something deep inside me started to churn. There was something more to these rules than I could understand. Something serious, something ancient about them. I thought I was just joining a forest service, but in that moment I realized I was becoming part of something far bigger. The first rule was simple, and it made sense in a practical way. Stay on the trail. Always. But as I heard it from the ranger's lips, I began to sense there was more to it than just avoiding dangerous wildlife or difficult terrain. The woods were vast and untamed, and getting lost could mean disappearing without a trace. But there was more to it, something unspoken that made the hairs on the back of my neck stand up. The second rule: never stray from the campfire after dark. That one was met with knowing looks. I was handed a flashlight and told that if the sun went down, I was to stay close to the fire. It wasn't just about keeping warm. There were creatures out there in the dark, things that were more than just bears or cougars, things that thrived in the night. I chalked it up to superstition, but there was an odd conviction in the eyes of the rangers that made me reconsider. The third rule: trust the sounds of the forest. If something is out of place, it's not just a deer or a raccoon. I wasn't sure what to make of it at first, but they made it clear that the forest had its own rhythm, and if something disrupted that rhythm, it was a signal to be on guard. There were things in the woods that could mask their presence, and if you didn't listen closely, you might not realize until it was too late. The fourth rule: never approach a tree with markings. It's not worth the risk. This one sent a cold chill down my spine. The markings were not random. They were deliberate, and they meant something. Something I wasn't told about in detail. All I knew was that trees with strange, unnatural carvings should be avoided at all costs. I didn't ask any further questions. It wasn't the kind of rule you questioned. It was the kind you followed blindly. The fifth rule: if you see something that doesn't belong, don't try to take it. Leave it where it is. This was something I found odd at first, but the rangers were insistent. Some things in the forest weren't meant to be moved or disturbed. That rock, that branch, that odd trinket you might find while walking. It might seem innocent, but if it was in the wrong place, if it was something that didn't belong, it could bring a curse, or worse. The sixth and final rule: never, under any circumstances, go off the grid. If you lose contact, get back immediately. No exceptions. This rule was drilled into my head over and over again, and I could see the others had learned it the hard way. If the radios went down or the satellite phones failed, you didn't try to survive on your own. You called for help, and if that didn't work, you found the nearest ranger station. No matter what, the forest could swallow you whole if you weren't careful. At first, I thought these rules were just precautionary measures, common sense in a place like this. But as the days passed, as I went on patrols and worked through the wilderness, I began to feel that there was something more lurking beneath these guidelines. Something old, something sinister. That night, I had my first encounter with the forest's strange undercurrents. I was walking the trail, collecting trash, when I heard a twig snap behind me. I turned, half expecting to see a deer, but nothing was there. Then I heard it again, a low growl, too deep to be an animal I knew. My heart pounded in my chest as I realized I had broken rule number 3. I had ignored the rhythm of the forest. I wasn't alone. I stood frozen on the trail, straining my ears to listen, my breath caught in my chest. The growl was low, deep, and unmistakable, a rumble that seemed to come from the earth itself. It wasn't the sound of any animal I'd ever heard in the forest. No bear, no wolf, no mountain lion. This was something different. The hair on the back of my neck prickled as I slowly turned my head, scanning the trees around me. The forest had gone unnervingly silent. The usual chorus of birds and insects was absent, and even the rustle of leaves seemed to have ceased. The world around me felt suspended, as if the forest itself was holding its breath, waiting for something to happen. I tightened my grip on the flashlight in my hand, its beam flickering slightly as my hand trembled. The growl came again, louder this time. It was closer, much closer. I tried to focus, trying to see through the thick darkness, but I couldn't make out anything. The forest was as still as a tomb, the shadows so dense that the flashlight seemed to struggle against them, its beam barely cutting through the night. My heart was hammering in my chest as the adrenaline surged through my veins. I thought about the rules, especially the one about trusting the sounds of the forest. If something was out of place, it wasn't a random animal, and right now, nothing about this situation felt normal. My training told me to stay calm, to trust my instincts, but the reality was setting in. I wasn't in control here, the forest was. Suddenly, I heard a rustling behind me. I spun around, my flashlight sweeping the area. I saw nothing at first, but then the beam landed on something, a shadow, tall and humanoid, standing just at the edge of the clearing. My breath caught in my throat as my heart skipped a beat. The figure was tall, much taller than any person, and it was standing perfectly still, watching me. Its outline was vague, shifting, like it didn't want to be seen. I couldn't make out any details, just a shadow, a presence. I didn't move. I couldn't move. The figure didn't advance, but it didn't retreat either. It just stood there, staring at me with an intensity that made my blood run cold. I wanted to shout, to call for backup, but something deep within me told me that if I made a sound, if I moved too quickly, the thing would be on me in an instant. So I stood there, frozen, my flashlight trembling in my hand. Then the growl came again. This time, it was accompanied by something else, something more disturbing. A deep, guttural laugh, a sound that echoed through the trees, shaking the leaves from the branches. It was a laugh that didn't belong, a laugh that sounded both ancient and predatory. The figure tilted its head slightly, as if amused by my fear. It was then that I remembered the second rule: never stray from the campfire after dark. I felt the weight of that rule hit me with a new intensity. The laughter was no longer just a sound. It was a warning, a reminder that I was not welcome here. The forest wasn't a friendly place. It had its own set of rules, and it didn't take kindly to intruders. The figure took a step forward, the rustling of its movement sending a ripple of panic through me. I took a slow step back, my mind racing with options, but the truth was clear. There were no options. This wasn't a situation I could talk my way out of. I had to retreat. But before I could turn, the figure spoke, its voice deep and rasping. "You don't belong here." The words weren't threatening, not really. They were more like a fact. The forest had claimed me, and I was just another lost soul wandering through its darkness. I couldn't take it anymore. I turned on my heel, running down the trail as fast as I could. My breath was ragged, my legs burning with the effort, but I couldn't stop. I didn't look back, couldn't afford to. I had broken the rules, and now the forest was responding, pulling me deeper into its grip. I ran for what felt like an eternity, my feet pounding against the soft ground, my mind screaming at me to go faster. But every step I took felt like I was being pulled backward. The trees around me seemed to bend and twist, as though they were closing in, blocking my path. I tried to find the trail markers, the familiar signs that would guide me back to camp, but the forest had swallowed them. It had swallowed me. And then I heard it again, the growl. Closer this time. It was right behind me. I pushed myself harder, my breath coming in ragged gasps, but the sound of the growl grew louder, echoing through the trees. My legs were giving out, my body exhausted from running, but I couldn't stop. If I stopped, I knew I wouldn't make it. Finally, I saw it, a faint light in the distance, the warm glow of the campfire. Relief flooded through me, but it was short-lived. As I approached the clearing, I saw something that made my blood run cold. The figure was standing at the edge of the firelight, just outside its reach. It was waiting for me. I slowed my pace, my instincts screaming at me to stop, to turn around. But I was too close to the fire now, too close to the safety I had taken for granted. I kept my eyes on the figure, knowing that the moment I turned my back on it, it would be upon me. When I stepped into the light of the fire, the growl stopped. The figure didn't move, but it was still watching me. I stood frozen in the glow of the campfire, staring at the shadowy figure just beyond its light. My heart was pounding in my chest, my breath coming in short, shallow gasps. The growl had stopped, but the air around me still crackled with tension, thick with the feeling that I was being watched, stalked. The forest had become its own predator, and I was the prey. I didn't dare take my eyes off the figure. It was standing still, but I could feel the malevolence radiating from it, an oppressive force that seemed to hang in the air like smoke. Its shape was vague, constantly shifting in the shadows, its features never quite revealing themselves fully. Every time I tried to look at it directly, the darkness around it seemed to deepen, as if the forest itself was protecting whatever it was. The figure didn't move. It didn't speak. It just watched me, and I felt every moment stretch longer, the weight of its gaze suffocating. The forest, which had once felt like a peaceful, tranquil haven, now seemed like a prison, a place that had swallowed me whole and was watching, waiting to devour me completely. I could hear the fire crackling behind me, the soft hiss of burning wood the only other sound in the oppressive silence. My mind raced. I needed to get back to the ranger station, to the safety of civilization. But the figure, the thing, was blocking the path, standing just beyond the reach of the firelight, daring me to step forward. I knew the rules. I knew I couldn't stray from the campfire after dark. I had broken that rule, and the consequences were becoming all too clear. But what could I do? I had to leave. The ranger station was just a few miles away. I could make it. I had to make it. I took a cautious step backward, my eyes never leaving the figure. But as soon as I moved, the shadows seemed to stretch, like fingers reaching out to stop me. I paused, heart racing, unsure if I had imagined it. The figure hadn't moved, but the forest seemed to be closing in around me. The shadows were deeper now, creeping closer, surrounding the fire inch by inch. A rustling noise suddenly came from the trees behind me, and I whipped around, expecting to see something or someone there. But there was nothing. The wind had picked up and the leaves rustled in the trees, but I felt a deep, unshakable unease that wouldn't let go. I turned back to the figure, my pulse quickening as I realized that it had moved closer. Just slightly, but enough that I could feel the shift in the air. I stepped backward again, this time more quickly. But as I moved, I felt the ground shift beneath me. My foot caught on something and I stumbled, falling to the ground. The flash of pain in my knee brought me back to the present, and I scrambled to push myself back up, only to find my hand pressing against something cold and wet. I looked down, my breath catching in my throat. It was a stone, smooth and slick, covered in some kind of dark substance. The shape of it was unusual, almost too perfect, like it had been placed there intentionally. I ran my fingers over it, the texture smooth but strange, and a faint tingling sensation ran up my arm as I touched it. Something about it didn't sit right. Then I heard the whisper. It was barely audible at first, but it quickly grew louder, surrounding me, creeping into my mind. It wasn't the growl anymore. It was a voice, a whisper, soft and inviting, but the words it spoke were chilling. "You're not supposed to be here." I recoiled from the stone, my heart hammering in my chest. The whisper seemed to come from everywhere, from the forest, from the shadows, from the very ground beneath me. I felt the presence behind me again, that oppressive weight, and I realized it was no longer just standing still. It was moving, slowly but with purpose. It was circling me, watching me like prey. I pushed myself to my feet, eyes scanning the area, searching for the thing, but it was gone. The shadows were thicker though, more concentrated, and I realized that I had to move. There was no more waiting. I couldn't stand here. I had to get out. With one last glance at the darkness, I turned and bolted toward the tree line, the sound of my feet pounding against the ground louder than anything else in the night. The air was thick with the scent of wet leaves and pine, but I could feel the weight of the forest pressing against me, pushing me backward, as though it didn't want me to leave. As I neared the edge of the trees, the figure appeared again, standing just outside the reach of the firelight. It didn't move toward me, but it didn't need to. Its presence alone was enough to make my legs freeze. I felt my heart skip a beat, and for the first time I questioned whether I would make it out alive. The whispers came again, this time clearer, more direct. "You are not allowed to leave." I didn't know what to do. I wasn't just dealing with the wilderness anymore. I wasn't just dealing with an animal or a lost hiker or a trick of the mind. I was dealing with something older, something beyond understanding. I turned back to the campfire, the small beacon of light in the distance. My flashlight was useless, flickering in my hand. I couldn't stay near the fire forever. The darkness was closing in around me, and I knew if I didn't act soon, I would be lost in the forest's twisted embrace. I took one last deep breath and began to run toward the camp. The shadows followed. I ran as fast as I could, my heart pounding in my chest, my breath ragged and shallow. The sounds of the forest were drowned out by the rush of blood in my ears and the echo of my footsteps on the ground. I could feel the air grow colder as I moved, the chill creeping in through my clothes, making my skin tighten with fear. The forest, once a quiet sanctuary, had transformed into something else entirely. It was alive, watching me, and I could feel its eyes everywhere. As I neared the camp, I tried to keep my pace steady, but my mind was racing. What had I seen? What was that thing? That figure in the shadows? Was it real? Was it alive? And the whispers that seemed to follow me no matter where I went. The fire in the camp was a welcome sight, a small circle of warmth in the otherwise oppressive night. I had to make it there. I had to get to the safety of the light before the forest could take me. I could hear something now, crunching leaves, the soft swish of branches moving. It wasn't just the wind. Something was following me. Something was moving in the darkness, staying just out of sight. The hairs on the back of my neck stood on end, and I dared not glance behind me. I wasn't sure I could handle what I might see if I did. My legs burned with exhaustion as I pushed myself faster. I could hear the beating of my own heart in my ears, the thudding rhythm drowning out all other sounds. I was almost there. Just a few more steps and I would be in the light, safe. But as I neared the clearing, the fire flickered. The shadows around me deepened, and the darkness seemed to grow longer, as though the trees themselves were stretching toward me. Don't look back. I whispered the thought to myself like a mantra. The rules that had been drilled into me. I shouldn't look back. I couldn't. Not with whatever was hunting me. A sound broke through my thoughts, a low growl, barely perceptible over the wind. My breath caught in my throat. It was close, too close. I sprinted the last few feet, diving into the camp with a desperate scramble. The fire's light illuminated the clearing in front of me, but it didn't feel like enough. The shadows felt like they were closing in on the edges of the firelight. I reached for the fuel, tossing a few more logs into the flames. The fire roared to life for a moment, but the shadows only seemed to stretch farther in response. The temperature around me had dropped even further, and I could feel my teeth start to chatter. The whispers came again, louder this time, as though the very trees were whispering to me, calling my name. "You're not safe here." The voice was soft, too soft, but it was clear, like it was coming from all around me. I whipped around, but there was no one there, just the flickering fire, the stillness of the night, and the creeping sensation that I was being watched. I grabbed my radio, my hands shaking, and tried to reach the ranger station. "This is Unit 3. Do you copy?" I said into the radio, my voice trembling despite myself. Nothing. I tried again. "Unit 3, please respond." Still nothing. The radio was static. It was as if the forest had swallowed the signal, cutting me off from the outside world. I cursed under my breath, the fear creeping back up my spine. I was alone. Truly alone. Suddenly, the crackle of a branch snapped me from my thoughts. I looked up. There, standing just beyond the firelight, was the figure. It had returned, tall and silent, like a shadow that had formed out of the darkness itself. It stood still, watching me, its outline flickering with the dim light of the fire. Its features were impossible to make out, its form shifting with the flickering shadows. I could feel my heart hammering in my chest, the primal instinct to flee rising in my veins. But I couldn't run. Not this time. It was too close, too real. The figure wasn't just a shadow. It was something else, something ancient, something dangerous. I stood frozen, staring at it as it slowly moved toward the edge of the light. It stopped there, just at the edge of the fire's warmth, like it was daring me to come closer. But I didn't move. I couldn't. Something deep inside me told me that stepping closer to it was a mistake, one I would never get the chance to regret. The figure tilted its head, and I saw something in the movement, a recognition. It was like it knew me. It was as if it could see past my flesh, my mind, into the very core of who I was. I felt exposed, vulnerable, like there was nothing I could hide from it. "You shouldn't have broken the rules." The voice was clearer now, echoing in my mind as well as my ears. It wasn't just the figure speaking, it was the forest. The trees, the ground, the wind, they were all speaking in unison. "Now you will pay the price." I could feel the shadows at the edge of the firelight stretch farther, like they were reaching for me. The wind howled, and I heard the soft thudding of something large moving through the underbrush, approaching. I turned, but there was no one, only the quiet rustling of leaves and the distant echoes of something waiting. My breath caught in my throat as the figure in front of me stepped closer, its form almost solidifying in the light, and the growl, the same growl I'd heard before, rose from the trees. Louder this time, fiercer. "You're not leaving." And as the shadows surged toward me, I realized the forest wasn't just watching, it was claiming me. I felt my body freeze as the shadow moved closer, its form becoming more defined in the flickering light of the campfire. The growl echoed in the air again, deep and resonant, vibrating through my bones. The figure had stopped just beyond the fire's reach, but its presence filled the space around me. My heart thudded in my chest, each beat thundering louder as I stood rooted to the spot. The air was thick with tension, suffocating, as if the forest itself was alive and breathing, its every whisper closing in on me. The figure stood still, watching me, waiting, and I knew it wasn't just a watcher, it was hunting. The silence stretched on for what felt like hours, but in reality it was mere seconds. It felt like time itself had slowed down, each moment stretching, hanging in the air, too heavy to hold. I wanted to scream, to move, to run, but my legs wouldn't obey. I couldn't tear my gaze away from the figure, its black eyes still hidden in the shadows, feeling like they were piercing through me. It was as though it could see straight into my soul, reading me, understanding my every fear, my every weakness. "You know you can't leave." The voice came again, soft but cold, cutting through the silence like a blade. It was no longer just a warning, it was a command. The forest had already decided my fate. There was no escape. I had broken the rules. I had crossed the line. I tried to breathe, tried to calm my racing heart. But the oppressive weight of the figure's gaze, the shadows, the whispers, was too much. The forest itself had its claws in me, pulling me deeper into its grasp. The figure's lips curled into a smile, twisted and knowing. It took one slow step forward, and the ground beneath me seemed to shake. The fire flickered, its light waning, the shadows around it expanding, stretching across the ground like fingers reaching for me. I knew I had to do something. I couldn't just stand here, but every movement felt wrong. like the very forest was watching, reacting. I turned, desperately searching for a way to escape, but the trees surrounding the camp were closing in, blocking the path. The space I had once thought was wide and open now felt suffocating, closing in on all sides. There was no way out. I turned back toward the fire, and the figure took another step, its silhouette darkening as it approached. The growl intensified, becoming louder and more distinct, and I could feel the ground tremble beneath my feet, as if something enormous was moving in the forest just beyond the reach of the firelight. My breath quickened, panic rising like a wave inside me. I reached for my radio, but the static in the air was deafening, the usual connection to the outside world now dead. The forest had cut me off, trapping me in its grip. There was no help coming. I was alone. The figure's voice was like ice, the words now a chilling whisper. You have nowhere to go. The rules are absolute. The forest will claim you, just like it claimed the others. The others. The words lingered in my mind, a whisper that refused to leave. What had happened to the others? The ones who had come before me, the ones who had wandered into the forest and never returned? Had they too broken the rules? Were they lost, consumed by the same dark presence that was now closing in on me? I took a step back, my heart pounding in my ears, but the ground beneath me shifted. I stumbled, barely catching myself as the earth seemed to rise up in front of me. The shadows in the trees deepened, swirling like a storm, and I could feel them pressing against me, pulling me in. The whispering started again, this time a chorus of voices, faint but persistent. Leave. Leave now. It was no use, there was nowhere to go. The forest had already taken root in my mind, in my soul. It had its claws in me, and I could feel the weight of its ancient presence wrapping around me. The rules were not just words. They were a part of the very fabric of this place, binding me here, trapping me in its eternal cycle. I looked up, my eyes scanning the dark sky above. The trees, the shadows, they all seemed to close in on me, blocking the stars, blocking any hope of light. The growl grew louder, closer, and I realized with a sinking feeling in my chest that the figure wasn't the only one here. It wasn't alone. There were more. I could hear them, moving through the trees, their footsteps soft but deliberate, as though they were circling, waiting for me to make a mistake, to show weakness. I had no way to know how many there were, but I knew one thing for sure. This wasn't a hunt that could be escaped. This was their domain, and I had intruded. I took a step back, my eyes darting around the clearing, trying to find some escape. But the shadows were closing in, the walls of the forest tightening around me. The figure in front of me stepped closer, its form now towering, its shadow engulfing me. I could feel its cold breath on my face, the air thick with the scent of decay. It's too late for you. The figure's voice was like a death sentence, final and cold. The forest has already claimed you. And with those words, I felt it. The sharp, overwhelming sensation of being pulled, not just physically, but into the very heart of the forest, into the darkness that had been waiting for me all along. I could feel it now, the pull, the dark, unrelenting force that was dragging me deeper into the woods. Every instinct in me screamed to fight back, to run, to break free. But the forest was too powerful. The shadows twisted, expanding, swallowing me whole. My legs moved of their own accord, dragging me forward against my will, my body no longer my own. The figure, that twisted presence, was still there, looming just beyond the reach of the firelight, but closer now, its presence more defined. I could hear the trees creaking around me, the earth beneath my feet shifting as if it were alive. I was surrounded, but not by wildlife, not by the forest I once knew. This was something else. The air was thick, heavy, pressing in from all sides, suffocating me. The growl from earlier came again, deep and primal, from all directions now, vibrating through the ground beneath me. I wanted to scream, but my voice wouldn't come. My throat was tight, as though the very forest was squeezing the life out of me. "You are ours now," the figure's voice rumbled, and I could feel the words reverberate through my chest, like they were coming from the earth itself. The shadows around me shifted, seemed to pulse in response to the voice. The air crackled with an ancient, malevolent energy. "You'll never leave. The forest does not let go." I tried to force my legs to stop, to make them obey, but it was no use. It was as if the very ground beneath me had a mind of its own. The path I had once known, the campfire that had felt like a refuge, was disappearing. The forest was swallowing it all up, and I was being consumed along with it. The figure moved closer now, its form growing taller, the darkness around it warping. The sound of its footsteps was muffled by the dampness of the earth, but I could feel it approaching, every step closer to me like a tightening noose. I could see its face now, its eyes, dark and unblinking, staring straight through me. There was no emotion in them, no recognition, just an ancient, cold presence that seemed to absorb everything in its path. "You will become part of this place," it whispered, and I felt the darkness close in on me even tighter. "You will serve the forest, just like the others before you." My mind raced as I tried to understand. Serve the forest? What did it mean? The others? Who were the others? I thought back to the stories the rangers had whispered around the campfire, the ones about the old legends, the warnings about the forest's secrets. I thought of the rules, the ones that kept us safe, that kept us from straying too far, from doing anything that would disturb the balance. The rules that I had ignored. Never stray from the campfire after dark. Trust the sounds of the forest. Never approach the marked trees. If you see something that doesn't belong, don't touch it. I had broken them all, and now the forest was taking its toll. The darkness around me seemed to pulse with the figure's words, and the air became colder still. The whispers, they grew louder, now a chorus, a cacophony of voices from every corner of the forest. I could hear their thoughts, their warnings, their fears. They had all been here before. They were all part of the same cycle, bound to the forest in some way I didn't understand, but I was about to. I felt a cold hand on my shoulder and I spun around, gasping. But there was nothing, just the darkness. "You belong to us now," the figure repeated, and this time I felt it in my very bones. The ground beneath me shifted again and I stumbled forward. The trees around me seemed to bend, their trunks twisting in unnatural angles, their branches reaching down like skeletal arms. The very forest seemed to close in around me, suffocating me, locking me in a cage that I had unknowingly walked into. "No," I gasped, trying to break free. My heart pounded in my chest, and for the first time, I truly understood the weight of the forest's power. The rules were more than just guidelines. They were chains, chains that kept the dark forces at bay, chains that I had broken. I stumbled forward, trying to escape, but the forest moved with me, surrounding me, guiding me deeper. I felt my legs give out, but there was nowhere to fall. The earth beneath me seemed to swallow me whole, pulling me down, pulling me deeper into the forest's heart. I couldn't escape. But then, something shifted. The ground beneath me stopped moving and the air grew still. I was no longer being pulled. I was simply standing. The darkness around me receded slightly, and for a moment, the whispers stopped. And then I saw it. The doorway. It was small, unassuming, almost hidden in the trees, but it was there. The doorway was a gap between two massive oak trees, their trunks twisted and contorted as though they had grown together over time. Beyond it was the faintest glimmer of light, a beacon in the endless darkness of the forest. I took a hesitant step toward it, unsure of what would happen if I passed through. But I had no choice. The forest had brought me here, and now I had to finish what it had started. I stepped forward. The moment I crossed the threshold, I felt a sudden, overwhelming force. The ground shifted beneath me once more, and the air became thick with the presence of something ancient, something that had been waiting for me. I could feel the weight of the forest, the power that pulsed through the very ground beneath me. The whispers returned, louder than before. "You're home now." And I realized with a sinking feeling in my stomach that the cycle was complete. I was part of the forest now, forever.